Have you ever felt too small to make a difference in the world? Have you ever looked at the injustices, global problems, and crises that surround us and thought, I'm just one person. What can I do? If you're watching this video, you've probably experienced that sense of powerlessness that corrodes the modern soul. It's as if we're trapped in an invisible cage, observing a world that seems too big for our hands, too complex for our minds. But I have news that will change all that. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to unlock codes in your mind that have been dormant for so long you don't even remember they exist. Codes that great emperors, philosophers, and leaders throughout history have used to transform not only their lives, but entire civilizations. You will leave this video transformed, with a new perspective on your personal power and your ability to impact the world. Over 2,000 years ago, a slave named Epictetus discovered that his inner freedom was greater than any physical chain. A Roman emperor, Marcus Aurelius, used these same principles to rule the largest empire of the time with wisdom and compassion. A political advisor, Seneca, influenced decisions that shaped the fate of millions. What did they have in common? It wasn't external power, money, or privilege. It was something far more powerful: Stoic philosophy. Stoicism isn't just an ancient school of thought buried in history books. It's a practical system, tested over millennia, that transforms ordinary people into extraordinary agents of change. Today, I'll share with you 10 Stoic principles that will awaken the sleeping giant within you. Each of these codes is a key that opens a different door of your consciousness, revealing powers you've always possessed but never knew how to use. Prepare yourself for a journey that begins within you and expands to transform everything around you. Because the truth is this: the world doesn't need one more person feeling small and powerless. The world needs you, awake, aware, and acting with purpose. Shall we begin? You have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. The first code I'm going to unlock in your mind is the most fundamental of all, and perhaps the most liberating. It's the code of absolute control, not over the world, but over yourself. Epictetus, who spent years chained as a slave, discovered a truth that would change his life forever. There are only two categories of things in the universe: those that are under our control and those that are not. Imagine for a moment that you're a gardener. You can't control the weather, you can't make the sun shine when it's stormy, you can't prevent pests from appearing. But you have absolute control over how you prepare the soil, how you plant the seeds, how you water your plants, and how you care for your garden. A wise gardener doesn't waste time complaining about the rain or the sun. They work with the conditions they have, focusing entirely on what they can control. Your mind is that garden. Your thoughts, your reactions, your choices, your values, these are the elements that are truly within your control. But how often do you waste your mental energy trying to control traffic, other people's behavior, or outcomes that don't depend solely on you? It's like trying to hold water with your hands, frustrating and futile. I'm going to give you a practical exercise that will change your life. Right now, take a sheet of paper and draw a line down the middle. On the left side, right in my control. On the right side, out of my control. Now, list all the things that have caused anxiety, stress, or worry in your life. Be honest, put each item in the appropriate column. You'll discover something revolutionary: most of your suffering comes from trying to control the things in the right column. The traffic that makes you late, the words other people say about you, whether it will rain at your wedding, whether your boss will approve your project. You're wasting precious energy on battles you can't win. But here's the secret the great Stoics discovered: when you withdraw all your energy from the things you can't control and redirect it toward what is truly within your power, something magical happens. You become incredibly powerful. It's not power over others, but power over yourself, and that's the only real power there is. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, wrote in his personal diary, "Confine yourself to the present." He knew that even as emperor, his true power lay in his moment-to-moment choices. How would he react to a crisis? How would he treat an enemy? How would he use his time? These were the battles that truly mattered. When you master this first code, a profound transformation occurs. Anxiety decreases dramatically because you stop fighting windmills. Your energy multiplies because it's being directed where it can truly make a difference. And something even more extraordinary happens. The people around you begin to notice a change in you. There's a serenity, a calm strength that emanates from someone who knows exactly where their power zone lies. Think of someone you deeply admire, probably someone who doesn't let external circumstances faze them, who remains calm in the storm, who acts purposefully even when everything around them seems chaotic. This person has learned, consciously or unconsciously, this first Stoic code. But how does this connect to making a difference in the world? Here's the truth that will surprise you: you can't give what you don't have. You can't inspire calm if you live in panic. You can't impart wisdom if your mind is in constant turmoil. You can't lead others if you can't lead yourself. Inner work isn't selfish, it's preparedness. It's like a flight instructor who must put on his own oxygen mask before helping others. When you master self-control, you become a beacon for others still lost in the storm. The second code I'm going to activate in your mind will demolish one of the biggest lies our society tells us, that we need to make grand gestures to make an impact. This lie paralyzes millions of people who wait for the perfect opportunity, the ideal moment, the resources to finally make a difference. But the Stoics understood a revolutionary truth: the world is transformed by small acts of virtue, consistently repeated. It's like a drop of water that, falling repeatedly on the same rock, eventually pierces it. Each drop seems insignificant, but together, they move mountains. Let me tell you about Maria, a receptionist working at a public hospital. She doesn't have a college degree, she doesn't hold a leadership position, and she doesn't have millions of social media followers. But Maria has discovered the second Stoic code. Every morning, she arrives at work with a simple mission: to practice the 4 cardinal virtues in every interaction. Wisdom: she truly listens to each person who comes to the counter, seeking to understand not only what they say, but also what they need. Fairness: she treats everyone with the same respect and attention, regardless of social class or appearance. Courage: she defends patience when she sees injustice, even if it makes her uncomfortable. Temperance: she remains calm and balanced even on the most chaotic days. What happened? Within 2 years, the hospital's atmosphere changed completely. Other staff members began to imitate her behavior. Patients left not only physically healed but also emotionally touched. The hospital gained a reputation for excellent care. Doctors began applying to work there. And it all started with a receptionist who decided to practice small virtues daily. This is the hidden power of micro-virtues, small acts of kindness, honesty, courage, and wisdom that seem insignificant but create ripples of transformation. When you hold the door for someone, you are practicing kindness. When you tell the truth in a difficult situation, you are practicing honesty. When you stand up for someone who is being wronged, you are practicing courage. When you listen to someone without judgment, you are practicing wisdom. Each of these actions seems small, but they do something extraordinary: they create patterns. Not just in you, but in the people around you. There's a psychological law called emotional contagion. Our emotions and behaviors spread like viruses, infecting others around us. The difference is, you can choose which type of virus you spread. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who advised emperors, wrote, "Every new beginning arises from the end of some other beginning." Every small act of virtue is both an end and a beginning. It's the end of an old pattern and the beginning of something new. And here's the secret: you don't have to wait for Monday, the first of the month, or the new year. You can start now, in your next interaction. Think about your last week. How many opportunities did you have to practice small virtues? How many times could you have listened more attentively? How many times could you have acted with more courage? How many chances did you have to be more fair or more temperate? These aren't questions to make you feel guilty, but to show you that opportunities for impact are everywhere. What makes this code even more powerful is that it works regardless of your social status, financial resources, or influence. A student can practice virtues as much as a CEO. A housewife can have as much impact as a politician. A retiree can inspire as much as a young entrepreneur. But here's the most fascinating aspect: When you start practicing small virtues consistently, something changes within you. You develop what the Stoics called character, an inner strength that becomes your hallmark. People begin to trust you because they know you're trustworthy. They begin to seek your opinion because they know you're wise. They begin to follow you because they know you're courageous. And so, small step by small step, you become exactly the kind of person the world needs. Not through grand gestures or dramatic revolutions, but through the consistent practice of virtues that transform you and, consequently, transform everyone around you. The third code I'm going to unlock in your mind is perhaps the most misunderstood of all. When we talk about acceptance, many people think of resignation, giving up, and conforming to unfair situations. But the Stoics discovered something very different. Acceptance isn't passivity, it's the smartest strategy for maximizing your transformative power. Imagine you have a limited amount of mental and emotional energy each day, like a battery that needs to be managed wisely. Now imagine you're in an epic battle, but you have to choose which fronts to fight on. You can waste your energy attacking impregnable fortresses, or you can focus all your strength on the points where you can truly win. This is the essence of Stoic wisdom. It's not about giving up, it's about choosing your battles with surgical intelligence. When you accept what you cannot change, you free up precious energy to transform what is truly within your reach. Let me tell you the story of Carlos, a businessman who discovered this code the hard way. His company was being investigated for irregularities he didn't commit, but rather those perpetrated by a dishonest partner. Carlos spent months obsessed, trying to control the media narrative, convince everyone of his innocence, and change public opinion. He was consuming all his energy in a battle he couldn't win directly. That's when he encountered the Stoic teachings. He realized there were two parallel realities: the reality he couldn't control, the investigation, the media, people's opinions, and the reality he had complete control over, his actions, his integrity, how he would respond to the crisis. The transformation was radical. Carlos stopped trying to control the external narrative and focused all his energy on proving his integrity through concrete actions. He cooperated fully with the investigation, was transparent with clients and suppliers, and used the crisis as an opportunity to implement even more rigorous compliance systems. Instead of being a victim of circumstances, he became the protagonist of his own recovery. The result? Within 6 months, he was not only exonerated, but his company emerged stronger and more respected than before. Clients who had drifted away returned, impressed by his conduct during the crisis. New partners were interested in working with someone who demonstrated such character under pressure. This is the power of active acceptance. It doesn't make you passive, it makes you strategic. When you stop wasting energy fighting the wind, you can use that same energy to adjust your sails and sail in the direction you've chosen. But how do you apply this in practice? First, you need to develop what I call control radar, a near-instantaneous ability to distinguish between what is and isn't under your control. This requires constant practice, like a muscle that needs to be exercised. Whenever you feel anxious, frustrated, or angry, pause and ask yourself, what exactly is within my control in this situation? You may not be able to control whether you get promoted, but you can control the quality of your work. You may not be able to control how others react to your ideas, but you can control how you present them. You may not be able to control whether someone will love you, but you can control whether you become a lovable person. Seneca wrote, "It is not what happens to us, but our reaction to what happens to us that hurts us." This quote contains one of the most powerful secrets of human psychology. Two people can face exactly the same situation and have completely different outcomes, not because of the situation itself, but because of how they choose to respond to it. The most liberating aspect of this code is that it gives you back control of your life. Not control over everything that happens, that's an illusion that causes suffering. But control over the only thing that truly matters, your response to what happens. When you master this third code, something extraordinary happens. People begin to see you as incredibly strong and composed. Not because you don't face difficulties, but because you face them in a way that inspires others. You become a role model for how to deal with adversity, and this naturally attracts people who also want to develop this inner strength. And here's how this connects to making a difference in the world. When you stop wasting energy on battles you can't win, all that energy becomes available to fight for the causes that truly matter. You become a more effective warrior, not because you fight harder, but because you fight smarter. The fourth code I'm going to activate in your consciousness will destroy one of the greatest fallacies of our time, the belief that to influence others, we need to speak louder, argue better, or have more followers. But the great Stoics discovered a truth that completely revolutionizes our understanding of leadership: silent actions have more power than 1,000 eloquent speeches. Marcus Aurelius was undoubtedly the most powerful man of his time. He could have ruled through fear, imposition, and authoritarian decrees. But he chose a different path. His meditations reveal a leader who influenced primarily through personal example. He didn't tell others how to live, he lived in a way that inspired others to question how they were living. There's a world of difference between being a preacher and being an example. The preacher points the way for others to go, but remains where he is. The example walks in the direction he believes is right, and others naturally follow suit. The preacher generates resistance, the example generates inspiration. Think about the person who most positively influenced you in life. It probably wasn't someone who spent all their time telling you what to do, but someone who simply lived in a way you admired. Maybe it was their consistency, their integrity, their way of treating people, their ability to remain calm under pressure. You wanted to be like that person not because they convinced you with arguments, but because they inspired you with actions. This is the essence of quiet leadership, influencing through consistency between what you say and what you do. It's a form of power that doesn't depend on hierarchical position, financial resources, or oratory skills. It depends on one thing: authenticity. Let me tell you about Anna, an elementary school teacher who discovered this code. She worked at a public school in a poor community, where many colleagues had already given up on making a difference. The complaints were constant: lack of resources, student disinterest, absenteeism, low salaries. The environment was tainted by pessimism. Anna could have joined the chorus of lamentations. Instead, she decided to be an example of the change she wanted to see. She arrived 30 minutes early every day to prepare her classes with care. She treated each student as if they were the most important in the world. She used her own money to buy materials when necessary. She never spoke ill of other colleagues or the administration. When faced with difficulties, she maintained her dignity and sought solutions. What happened was magical. First, her students began to change. Not because she pressured them, but because they felt valued and inspired. Then, other teachers began to notice the results in her class. Some began to imitate her practices. Parents began asking for their children to be in Teacher Anna's class. Within 3 years, the entire school had transformed. Anna never gave a single speech about what education should be. She simply showed what education could be. Her influence spread not through words, but through tangible results that others could see and touch. This is the power of quiet leadership. It is irrefutable. You can disagree with arguments, but you can't disagree with results. You can resist sermons, but you can't resist genuine inspiration. When someone demonstrates through consistent action that a better path is possible, it awakens something profound in those around them. But here's the deeper secret: quiet leadership isn't about perfection. It's about authenticity. People don't follow unattainable saints, they follow real human beings who are genuinely trying to be better. When you strive to live according to your values, even when it's difficult, it creates a powerful emotional connection with others who are also struggling. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What we do now echoes into eternity." He understood that every action, every choice, every moment of integrity or lack thereof, was creating ripples that would expand far beyond his individual life. His influence depended not only on his imperial decrees, but on how he treated a servant, how he responded to betrayal, how he faced a crisis. Quiet leadership is especially powerful because it doesn't generate resistance. When you try to convince someone through arguments, you're creating a confrontational dynamic. But when you simply live your principles, you're creating an opportunity for others to freely choose to follow your example. And here's how this connects to making a difference in the world. In a time of so much noise, so many voices competing for attention, so much contradictory information, people are hungry for authenticity. They want to see someone who actually lives what they preach. When you become that person, you don't just change your own life, you become a beacon guiding others out of the darkness. The fifth code I'm going to unlock in your mind will completely transform your relationship with difficulties. We live in a culture that sees obstacles as enemies to be avoided, problems to be eliminated, pain to be numbed. But the Stoics discovered a revolutionary truth: obstacles are not impediments on the path, they are the path. Imagine you're hiking a mountain trail and encounter a giant boulder blocking your path. You have three options: return home defeated, stand still and lament, or use the boulder as a stepping stone to climb even higher. The Stoics chose the third option, and it made them some of the most resilient and influential people in history. Every obstacle you face is actually an invitation in disguise. An invitation to develop muscles you didn't know you had. An invitation to discover inner resources that were dormant. An invitation to become the person capable of helping others facing similar challenges. Let me tell you about Roberto, an executive who discovered this code in the most brutal way possible. At 45, at the peak of his career, he was diagnosed with a degenerative disease that would force him to leave his job and face a long and uncertain journey of treatment. His first reaction was one of outrage. Why me? Why now? This isn't fair. For months, Roberto struggled with reality, wasting precious energy on anger and self-pity. That's when he encountered the Stoic teachings about turning obstacles into opportunities. He began asking a different question: what is this situation trying to teach me? How can I use this experience to grow and help others? The transformation was extraordinary. Roberto began documenting his journey, sharing not only the challenges but also the lessons he was learning. He discovered an inner strength he never knew he had. He developed deep empathy for others facing similar difficulties. He learned to appreciate simple moments he previously considered insignificant. Within 2 years, Roberto had become a reference in the community of people with his condition. He created a blog that helped thousands of people. He developed a support program that was adopted by hospitals. He wrote a book that inspired people not only about his illness, but about any kind of adversity. The obstacle that seemed to destroy his life had become the source of his greatest impact on the world. This is the power of the discipline of perception, the ability to see opportunities where others see only problems. It's not about being naive or denying the reality of difficulties. It's about recognizing that every difficulty carries within it the seeds of an equivalent opportunity. When you lose a job, you might see only rejection, or you might see an opportunity to discover a calling you'd never considered. When a relationship ends, you might see only abandonment, or you might see an opportunity to grow and become a more complete person. When you face an illness, you might see only limitation, or you might see an opportunity to develop courage and help others in similar situations. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave, wrote, "It is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about events." He understood that the same situation can be a tragedy or an opportunity, depending on the lens through which you view it. But here's the deeper secret: when you turn your obstacles into opportunities for growth, you develop something the Stoics called unbreakable inner strength. You become someone who not only survives storms, but uses them to strengthen you. And this creates a magnetic quality that attracts people who also want to develop this resilience. Think about the people you admire most. They're likely people who have faced significant hardships and transformed them into wisdom, strength, or compassion. They're admired not because of their obstacles, but because of how they handled them. The most beautiful aspect of this code is that it transforms you from victim to mentor. When you learn to navigate a specific difficulty, you become naturally capable of helping others facing similar challenges. Your pain becomes purpose, your wound becomes your source of healing for others. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life, it is all within you, in your way of thinking." He understood that happiness comes not from the absence of obstacles, but from the ability to transform obstacles into opportunities for growth and service. And here's how this connects to making a difference in the world. When you stop being a person who avoids difficulties and become a person who transforms them, you become exactly the kind of person the world needs. You become someone who not only survives crises, but who helps others navigate them. The sixth code I'm going to activate in your consciousness will expand your perception in a way that may initially be uncomfortable, but will ultimately prove profoundly liberating. We live in an age of hyper-individualism, where we are constantly bombarded with messages about our personal importance, our rights, our needs. But the Stoics discovered a paradoxical truth: the more you understand your true position in the universe, the more powerful you become. Imagine you're watching an ant carrying a crumb. For the ant, this crumb is the center of the universe, its survival, its mission, its identity. But you, with your broader perspective, see that the ant is part of a colony, embedded in an ecosystem, part of a planet, orbiting a star, part of a galaxy among billions. This perspective doesn't diminish the ant's importance, it reveals its true interconnected nature. This is the power of cosmic perspective. It doesn't make you feel insignificant, it makes you understand that you are part of something magnificently larger. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the largest empire of his time, regularly practiced this mental exercise. He imagined himself from the perspective of the stars, seeing Earth as a tiny speck in the vast cosmos. This didn't make him feel small, it made him feel connected to something eternal and sublime. Let me tell you about Sophia, a lawyer who discovered this code during one of the worst crises of her life. She was going through a messy divorce, facing financial difficulties, and questioning all her choices. She was completely consumed by her personal problems, unable to see beyond her own suffering. It was during a sleepless night that Sophia went for a walk and happened to look up at the starry sky. At that moment, something clicked in her mind. She realized that her pain, however real, was only a small part of a much larger story. Millions of people had gone through divorce. Billions had faced financial hardship. Her experience, however unique it seemed to her, was part of a universal human experience. This realization didn't lessen her pain, but it completely changed her relationship with it. Sophia began to see her hardships not as personal punishments, but as part of her participation in the larger human experience. This connected her with a sense of purpose that transcended her immediate circumstances. Instead of remaining isolated in her suffering, Sophia began looking for ways to use her experience to help other women going through similar situations. She offered free legal advice to vulnerable women. She created support groups. She transformed her office into a welcoming space for those who needed not only legal assistance but also human understanding. The transformation was extraordinary. Sophia discovered that when you serve something greater than yourself, your personal problems don't disappear, but rather take on a different context. They become part of a larger narrative of growth and contribution. Her pain transformed into compassion, her experience into wisdom, her wound into a source of healing for others. This is the power of the cosmic perspective. It reveals that you are not an isolated individual fighting alone against the universe. You are part of an infinite tapestry of connections, where every strand, including you, is essential to the beauty of the whole. When you truly understand this, two things happen: you feel less alone and more responsible. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "We are born to work together like feet, hands, and eyes, like the two rows of teeth, upper and lower." He understood that nature designed us for cooperation, not competition. We are organs of a larger organism, each with its own unique function, but all interdependent. But how do you cultivate this cosmic perspective in practice? First, you need to regularly expand your temporal perspective. When you're facing a problem, ask yourself, will this matter 10 years from now? In 100 years from now? Not to diminish the importance of what you're experiencing, but to put it in context. Second, practice the exercise of connection. When you wake up in the morning, before getting up, spend a few minutes contemplating all the people who contributed to your morning. The farmer who planted the coffee, the driver who transported it, the worker who built your house, the scientists who developed electricity. You are connected to millions of people, even without knowing their names. Third, develop the habit of considering future generations in your decisions. Ask yourself, how will this choice affect the people who will live on this planet after me? This isn't just ecological awareness, it's cosmic awareness. It's understanding that you are a link in a chain that extends infinitely in both directions. The most liberating aspect of this perspective is that it dissolves the neurotic ego that causes us so much suffering. When you understand that you are not the center of the universe, you stop wasting energy trying to control things that are beyond your control. When you understand that you are part of something bigger, you find meaning even in seemingly small actions. This perspective also completely transforms their relationship with death. The Stoics saw death not as an end, but as a transition, a return to the cosmic elements from which we came. This understanding removes the paralyzing fear of finitude and replaces it with a sacred urgency. Time is limited, so each moment must be lived with purpose. And here's how this connects to making a difference in the world. When you understand that you're part of something bigger, you naturally begin to consider the common good in your decisions. You stop making decisions based solely on immediate personal benefit and start considering the long-term impact on the entire human community. You become a guardian of future generations, a responsible steward of the resources entrusted to you, a conscious participant in the grand symphony of existence. And this awareness, in itself, is a powerful way to make a difference in the world. The seventh code I'm about to unlock in your mind will completely transform your capacity for human connection. We live in a time of extreme division, where people position themselves in opposing trenches, shouting at each other across chasms of incomprehension. But the Stoics discovered a powerful tool that can build bridges where others see only walls: rational empathy. There's a fundamental difference between emotional empathy and rational empathy. Emotional empathy is when you feel someone else's pain and let yourself be carried away by that emotion. It's as if you fall into the hole with the person suffering. Rational empathy is when you deeply understand another person's perspective, but maintain your ability to think clearly and act helpfully. It's as if you throw them a rope to help them out of the hole. Let me tell you about Dr. Miguel, a physician who discovered this code during one of the most challenging situations of his career. He worked in a public hospital emergency room and, on a particularly difficult night, treated a man who had been shot during a robbery. Minutes later, the robber arrived, also shot by the police. Miguel's first reaction was one of revulsion. How could he treat with the same care someone who had just caused so much suffering? But then he remembered the Stoic teachings on understanding before judgment. He forced himself to look beyond the immediate situation and try to understand the whole story. During the consultation, Miguel spoke with the robber. He discovered he was a father who had been unemployed for months and couldn't bear to see his children go hungry. He didn't justify the crime, but he began to understand the chain of events that had led to that situation. He realized that, under similar circumstances, he himself might have made desperate decisions. This understanding didn't make Miguel condone the crime, but it helped him treat the assailant with human dignity. More than that, it inspired him to get involved in violence prevention programs, working with at-risk youth. His rational empathy transformed him from someone who merely reacted to the consequences of violence to someone who worked to prevent its causes. This is the power of rational empathy. It doesn't make you naive or complacent, but rather gives you the tools to understand the roots of problems and thus find more effective solutions. When you truly understand why people act the way they do, you can influence them more intelligently. Epictetus, who knew intimately the suffering of oppression, wrote, "It is not what people do that disturbs them, but their judgments about what they do." He understood that behind every action lies an internal logic, a belief system, a personal history. When you understand this logic, you can engage with it. But how do you develop rational empathy in practice? First, you need to learn to suspend initial judgment. Whenever you find yourself mentally criticizing someone, pause and ask yourself, what don't I know about this person's history? What circumstances might have led to this behavior? Second, practice multiple perspectives. When you disagree with someone, force yourself to argue from their perspective. Try to understand not only what they think, but why they think that way. What experiences, values, or fears might be motivating their position. Third, develop genuine curiosity about people. Instead of assuming you already know why someone acts a certain way, ask open-ended questions. Help me understand your perspective. What led you to think that way? How did you come to that conclusion? The most powerful aspect of rational empathy is that it disarms defensiveness. When people realize you're genuinely trying to understand them, not just waiting for your turn to speak, they open up. Barriers that seemed insurmountable begin to dissolve. Marcus Aurelius practiced this exercise regularly. Even when dealing with political enemies or people who betrayed him, he strived to understand their motivations. This didn't make him weak, it made him strategic. He could anticipate behaviors, find common ground, and build solutions that worked for everyone. Rational empathy also transforms your relationship with personal conflicts. When you understand that the person who hurt you is likely acting from their own wounds, you can respond wisely instead of reacting with anger. This doesn't mean accepting inappropriate behavior, but it does mean dealing with it more effectively. There's a powerful quote from the Stoics: "The best medicine for anger is contemplation." When you truly contemplate, not just superficially observe, but truly reflect on the circumstances that led someone to act the way they did, your anger turns to understanding, and your understanding turns to wisdom. And here's how this connects to making a difference in the world. In a time of extreme polarization, people who know how to build bridges are incredibly valuable. You become someone capable of mediating conflicts, of finding solutions where others see only intractable problems, of uniting people who seem irreconcilable. Rational empathy isn't just a social skill, it's a tool for social transformation. When you truly understand the different perspectives in a situation, you can find solutions that work for everyone. You become a bridge builder in an age of walls. The eighth code I'm going to activate in your consciousness will free you from one of the greatest sources of suffering in modern life: the obsession with results. We live in a culture addicted to metrics, where the value of an action is measured exclusively by its immediate consequences. But the Stoics discovered a liberating truth: when you focus on the process and detach yourself from the results, you paradoxically become more effective in achieving your goals. Imagine an expert archer preparing to shoot an arrow. He controls his posture, his breathing, his focus, the tension of the bow. But once the arrow leaves the bow, he no longer has control over it. The wind can change its trajectory, the target can move, unforeseen factors can interfere. The wise archer focuses entirely on the quality of his shot, not the final result. This is the essence of persistence without attachment, giving your best in the process, but accepting that the end result is beyond your complete control. It's a paradigm shift that can completely transform your relationship with goals, projects, and dreams. Let me tell you about Elena, a social entrepreneur who discovered this code during one of the most frustrating phases of her life. She had created an NGO to help women in vulnerable situations, but after 2 years of intense work, it seemed like nothing was working. Few resources, little recognition, and seemingly insignificant impact. Elena was obsessed with metrics: how many women served, how much money raised, how much media coverage gained. Every unmet goal was a source of frustration. Every subpar result was a blow to her self-esteem. She was so focused on the results that she lost sight of the joy of the process. That's when Elena encountered the Stoic teachings on detachment. She began to rethink her approach. Instead of defining herself by results, she began to define herself by the quality of her actions. Instead of measuring success solely by numbers, she began to measure it by the integrity with which she performed her work. The transformation was extraordinary. Elena began to find satisfaction in the daily process of serving. Every woman she served, regardless of statistics, represented a complete universe of value. Every small improvement in the project, even if it didn't generate headlines, was a real victory. She was making the difference she always wanted to make, but now she could see and feel it. And here's the paradox: when Elena stopped obsessing about results, the results began to improve. Her energy was directed toward effective action, not anxiety about outcomes. Her genuine passion attracted people and resources. Her consistent persistence began to generate the recognition she so desperately sought. This is the power of healthy detachment. It doesn't make you indifferent to results, but it frees you from the anxiety that can sabotage your ability to achieve them. When you're not constantly distracted by worries about the future, you can focus entirely on the present, where all effective action takes place. Seneca wrote, "It is not those who have too little, but those who desire more, who are poor." He understood that constant dissatisfaction with results is a form of spiritual poverty. When you can find satisfaction in the process of giving your best, you have already achieved a form of wealth that is independent of external circumstances. But how do you apply this in practice? First, you need to redefine how you measure success. Instead of focusing solely on end results, start celebrating process indicators: consistency, effort, learning, growth. These are elements that are entirely within your control. Second, develop the habit of regularly conducting an intention audit. Ask yourself, am I doing this for the right reasons? Am I giving my best in the process? Am I acting with integrity? If the answers are yes, you're already succeeding, regardless of the immediate results. Third, practice temporal perspective. When a result doesn't turn out as expected, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How does this prepare me for the next attempt? What skills did I develop in the process? You'll often discover that failure contains seeds of future success. The most liberating aspect of this approach is that it removes the paralyzing fear of failure. When you understand that your value lies not in results, but in the quality of your actions, you become much more courageous to try new things, take calculated risks, and persist through hardships. Marcus Aurelius faced plagues, wars, betrayals, and political crises. He couldn't control these events, but he could control how he responded to them. His legacy is not based on the problems he faced, but on the quality of character he demonstrated in facing them. Persistence without attachment also transforms your relationship with time. Instead of living in the future, yearning for results, you learn to inhabit the present, where all meaningful action takes place. This not only reduces anxiety but increases your effectiveness because you are fully present in what you are doing. There's a crucial difference between giving up and letting go. Giving up is stopping action when results don't appear quickly. Letting go is continuing to act with excellence, but without being defined by results. It's the difference between weakness and wisdom. And here's how this connects to making a difference in the world. When you persist without attachment to results, you become incredibly resilient. You can work on causes that may take decades to bear fruit. You can plant trees whose shade you may never sit under. You can work for changes that may only be recognized by future generations. This is the mindset of history's great transformers. They worked not for immediate glory, but for the integrity of the process. And this integrity, maintained over time, eventually created the transformations we admire today. The ninth code I'm going to unlock in your mind will completely transform your relationship with work. We spend most of our active lives working, but many of us treat work as something separate from our real lives, our values, our purpose. The Stoics discovered a revolutionary truth: any job can be transformed into a platform for spiritual practice and social impact. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO of a multinational company or a store clerk, a doctor or a ride-hailing driver, a teacher or a housewife. Every job is an opportunity to practice virtues, to serve other human beings, to contribute to the common good. The difference isn't in the work itself, but in the awareness and intention with which you perform it. Let me tell you about Joao, a doorman who discovered this code and transformed not only his own life, but the entire environment of the building where he worked. Joao could have seen his job as simply opening doors and receiving packages. Instead, he decided to see his role as guardian of the community and facilitator of people's lives. Joao began applying the 4 Stoic virtues to his daily work. Wisdom: he studied each resident, remembering their names, preferences, and personal circumstances. Justice: he treated everyone with the same respect, regardless of social status or mood. Courage: he stood up for what was right, even when it meant confronting inappropriate behavior. Temperance: he maintained emotional balance even on the most difficult days. Within a few months, Joao had become the heart of the building. Residents who previously barely greeted each other began interacting through his mediation. He created a support system for seniors, organized community events, and mediated disputes between neighbors. He transformed a simple residential building into a true community. And here's the most impressive thing: Joao didn't change professions, he didn't get a promotion, he didn't earn more money. He simply transformed his perspective on the work he already did. And this shift in perspective created an impact that expanded far beyond the doors of the building. This is the power of using your profession as a platform for virtue. You don't have to wait for the perfect opportunity or the ideal position to start making a difference. You can start right where you are, with what you have, doing what you already do, but with a completely different mindset. Seneca, who was one of the richest men in Rome, wrote, "All new work is difficult at first. But if you persist, it becomes familiar, and finally enjoyable." He understood that job satisfaction comes not primarily from the nature of the task, but from the attitude with which we perform it. But how can this be applied in practice? First, you need to redefine the purpose of your work. Instead of seeing it simply as a means of earning money, start seeing it as an opportunity to serve. All legitimate work serves someone in some way. Identify how your work contributes to the well-being of others. Second, turn every professional interaction into an opportunity to practice virtues. When serving a client, practice patience and kindness. When working as a team, practice cooperation and honesty. When faced with a problem, practice creativity and persistence. Every work situation is a laboratory for character development. Third, strive for excellence not just in results, but in process. The Stoics believed that excellence was a virtue in itself. When you dedicate yourself to doing your work to the best of your ability, not just for external rewards but for personal integrity, you are practicing a form of spiritual discipline. The most profound transformation happens when you stop working just for money and start working for purpose. This doesn't mean accepting exploitation or working for free. It means finding meaning and dignity in what you do, regardless of how much you earn doing it. Marcus Aurelius, who held the most powerful job in the world, regularly reminded himself that his role was to serve the common good. He saw himself not as someone who deserved privileges, but as someone who had been given the responsibility to use his power to benefit others. This perspective transformed his reign into an era of prosperity and justice. There's a fundamental difference between working on something and working for something. When you work on something, you're just a task executor. When you work for something bigger than yourself, you become a contributor to a meaningful cause. The most liberating aspect of this approach is that it removes the dependence on external factors to find satisfaction at work. You don't need a perfect boss, ideal colleagues, or optimal conditions to start practicing professional virtues. You can start immediately, regardless of your circumstances. This perspective also transforms your relationship with professional difficulties. Instead of seeing problems as irritating obstacles, you begin to see them as opportunities for growth. A difficult client? An opportunity to practice patience. A complex project? An opportunity to develop new skills. Conflict with colleagues? An opportunity to practice diplomacy. Many people wait until retirement to finally do something meaningful. But the Stoics understood that meaning isn't something you find at a specific stage in life, it's something you create through the awareness and intention you bring to each activity. And here's how this connects to making a difference in the world. When you transform your work into a platform for virtue, you not only improve your own life but also positively influence everyone around you. You become an example of how dignity and purpose can be found in any activity. Furthermore, you develop skills and resources that can be directed toward greater causes. Your professional expertise becomes a tool to serve the common good. Your professional network becomes a platform for mobilizing resources for social projects. Your experience becomes wisdom that can be shared with others. The 10th and final code I will unlock in your mind is perhaps the most powerful of all, because it is the code of infinite multiplication. Everything you've learned, all the wisdom you've acquired, every virtue you've developed, can be multiplied exponentially through a single action, sharing what you've learned. There's a fascinating mathematical truth about teaching. When you teach something, you don't lose that knowledge, you multiply it. It's like lighting a candle with your candle. Its light doesn't diminish, but now there are 2 lights where there was only 1 before. And if each of those lights lights more candles, in a short time you'll have illuminated an entire room. Let me tell you about Professor Carmen, a retired educator who discovered this code and transformed her retirement into one of the most impactful phases of her life. Carmen had dedicated 30 years to formal teaching, but when she retired, she felt she still had much to contribute. The problem was, she didn't know how. That's when Carmen realized that her true wealth lay not in the retirement she had accumulated, but in the wisdom she had gained through decades of experience. She knew how to deal with difficult children, how to motivate disinterested students, how to communicate complex concepts simply. This knowledge was incredibly valuable, but it was trapped in one person's experience. Carmen started small. She volunteered to help young teachers at her old school. She then created a blog sharing teaching techniques. She then began lecturing at universities. Gradually, she developed a mentoring program for aspiring educators. The impact was extraordinary. Each teacher Carmen mentored brought her techniques to hundreds of students. Each positively impacted student became more likely to achieve academic and personal success. Each success created ripples of impact that spread to families, communities, and future generations. In 5 years, Carmen had indirectly influenced thousands of students through the teachers she mentored. Her wisdom, which had previously benefited only her classes, was now being shared by dozens of educators who applied her teachings. This is the power of legacy wisdom. It transforms you from someone who makes a difference in an individual life to someone who makes a difference across generations. When you share what you've learned, you don't just help others, you ensure that your discoveries, your lessons, your experience continue to impact the world long after you're gone. Marcus Aurelius never intended his meditations to be published. They were personal reflections, written for himself. But these reflections, preserved and transmitted, influenced millions of people over 2 millennia. His legacy is not only the roads he built or the battles he won, but the wisdom he shared. But here's the secret: you don't have to wait until you're an expert to start teaching. You don't need to have all the answers or have achieved perfection. You just need to be a few steps ahead of someone who can benefit from your experience. Think about your personal journey. What obstacles have you overcome? What mistakes have you made and learned from? What skills have you developed? What insights have you gained? This experience is invaluable for anyone facing similar challenges. Maybe you've overcome anxiety and can help someone just starting out on this journey. Maybe you've learned to manage family conflicts and can guide someone going through a similar situation. Maybe you've developed a professional skill that can be shared. Maybe you've found meaning after a loss and can support someone through grief. Teaching doesn't have to be formal. It can be a conversation over coffee, a social media post, a letter to a friend, a silent example. Every time you share a lesson learned, you are teaching. Every time you model behavior that inspires others, you are teaching. Epictetus, who was a slave before becoming a teacher, understood that the most difficult experience can become the source of the most valuable lessons. His lessons on inner freedom were powerful precisely because he had experienced the lack of outer freedom. His wisdom was authentic because it had been tested by adversity. The most beautiful thing about teaching is that it completes the learning cycle. You don't truly learn something until you can teach it to someone else. The act of teaching forces you to organize your thoughts, clarify your ideas, and confront your inconsistencies. By teaching, you learn. There is a moral responsibility in teaching. When you acquire knowledge, especially knowledge that can alleviate suffering or improve lives, you have an obligation to share it. Keeping valuable wisdom to yourself is a form of selfishness that deprives the world of benefits that could be multiplied. But teaching also requires humility. You need to recognize that you don't know everything, that you're still learning, that you might be wrong about some things. The best teaching comes from those who maintain a beginner's mind, from those who teach not from a position of superiority, but from a position of service. Seneca wrote, "While we teach, we learn." He understood that teaching is a two-way process. You offer your experience, but you also receive new perspectives, questions that make you reflect, opportunities to see your own beliefs through different eyes. The legacy of wisdom is also a form of immortality. Your body is temporary, your life is finite, but the ideas you plant in the minds of others can last forever. When you teach someone to be braver, more compassionate, and wiser, you are planting seeds that can germinate for generations. And here's how this connects to making a difference in the world. When you teach what you've learned, you multiply your impact exponentially. One person you inspire can inspire 10 others. Those 10 can inspire 100. In a short time, your initial influence has created ripples of transformation that spread far beyond what you could achieve individually. You become not just someone who makes a difference, but someone who teaches others to make a difference. Not just someone who solves problems, but someone who empowers others to solve problems. Not just someone who practices virtue, but someone who multiplies virtue in the world. We've reached the end of this journey, but in reality, we're only at the beginning. The 10 codes we've unlocked together aren't just philosophical concepts, they're practical tools that can transform your life and, through it, the world around you. Let's quickly review the codes you now possess. First, master the circle of control. Focus only on what is truly within your power. Second, practice small virtues daily. Understand that great transformations begin with small, consistent acts. Third, accept the uncontrollable and transform the controllable. Use your energy strategically and intelligently. Fourth, be an example rather than a preacher. Influence through consistent actions, not just words. Fifth, turn obstacles into opportunities. See difficulties as invitations to growth and service. Sixth, cultivate a cosmic perspective. Understand that you are part of something infinitely greater. Seventh, practice rational empathy. Understand before judging. Build bridges where others see only walls. Eighth, persist without attachment to results. Focus on the process of excellence, not just the outcomes. Ninth, use your profession as a platform for virtue. Transform any work into an opportunity to practice values and serve others. And 10th, leave a legacy of wisdom. Teach what you have learned. Multiply its impact through generations. These codes are interconnected. Each one strengthens and amplifies the others. When you master self-control, it becomes easier to practice small virtues. When you practice virtues consistently, you naturally become an example for others. When you cultivate a cosmic perspective, you develop rational empathy. When you transform obstacles into opportunities, you develop the ability to persist without attachment to results. Implementing these codes doesn't have to be perfect from the start. The Stoics understood that philosophy was a practice, not a performance. You will make mistakes, you will forget, you will have difficult days where applying these principles will seem impossible. This is normal and expected. The important thing is to keep trying, keep growing, keep dedicating yourself to the process of becoming a better person. If you liked this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive an alert whenever a new video is released. Start with one code at a time. Perhaps choose the one that resonates most with you right now. Practice it for a few weeks until it becomes more natural. Then add another. Gradually, these principles will become second nature, an integral part of who you are. Remember, you don't need to change the whole world. You just need to change your small part of it. When you become a wiser, braver, more compassionate, and more whole person, you automatically make the world a better place. Your personal transformation is your contribution to the collective transformation. The world doesn't need another person feeling small and powerless. The world needs you, awake, aware, and acting with purpose. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you next time.